A very good evening and welcome to BizFest in Focus. This evening I have a special and interesting guest from the United Kingdom. He is Mr. Alan Yarrow, the Lord Mayor of the City of London. Starting off, a very good evening to you and welcome to Sri Lanka.
Shamir, good evening to you too.
Starting off, could you please explain to me the role of the Lord Mayor?
The Lord Mayor has a job as effectively the ambassador of the financial services sector for United Kingdom as a whole. So we look at all the services, including accountancy, insurance, shipping, commodities, foreign exchange, capital markets, and all those things associated with them.
So you are a global ambassador for the City of London, correct me if I'm wrong?
Correct.
Your travel is an integral part as far as this post is concerned. What is the purpose of your visit to Sri Lanka?
Well, the City of London is the international global centre, the largest international global centre of international finance in the world. We probably have about 2 million people employed in the sector. Our hinterland is about 65 million people. We have established the fact that financial services is the future for the economy, and therefore my job is to make sure, as the ambassador, that we are meeting our customers outside the UK as much as inside the UK. So I will travel about 100 days during my year, covering about 30 countries.
So you are making a sales pitch here in Sri Lanka?
I am a salesman.
Why must anyone consider the City of London?
Because of the time clock, because of the language, because of the fact of the rule of law of contract. Effectively, English law is probably the largest legal system under which most contracts are written. It's probably twice as large as our nearest competitor in foreign exchange. And so as you run through all these various areas, the history has lent London, partly by accident, also by design, an extraordinarily strong position in the world of finance.
During the last 5 years, you've been having 5 different Lord Mayors for the City of London. What have you been advocating differently from your predecessors?
Well, the idea is to have a continuum. The last 5 Lord Mayors have been very consistent about their message. Our message simply is that we have to get out there and make sure that the UK product, effectively, is out competing with the very best of the rest of the world. We've got a history here. We have heritage, but equally don't be beguiled by the heritage. The heritage is there as a foundation. The London today, the City of London, is very much up in an innovative way, up with the best and ahead of most people.
Given the current economic crisis plaguing the European Union, is it advisable to invest in London, which you deem as a financial hub?
Well, I mean, the economic crisis in Europe is one of lack of growth more than anything else, and we've got a very low level of growth. Funny enough, actually, in the last month or so, we're seeing a pickup in both Spain, Italy and France. So it looks as if the quantitative easing which Draghi has produced now is beginning to have a benefit. London itself is different. London isn't necessarily the same as every other part of the European Union. It has its own approach to things. It's got a very much more internationalised approach. We do focus on the fact that we have to be globally competitive, and that means that we sometimes beat to a slightly different tune.
The mood of the international community changed with the appointment of a new president, with the appointment of a new government here in Sri Lanka. How do you view this development?
Very favourably. I mean, there's no doubt that I think that over the last 30 years, Sri Lanka has had its mind distracted over internal issues, and I think probably now we've got a situation where we have a much more, a government in place potentially in the form of the new president, which is much more acceptable to the West. And we think that effectively is going to open up all sorts of opportunities for foreign direct investment, equally expanding that great untapped strength that Sri Lanka has with a highly educated populace actually involved in various businesses.
Lord Mayor, you met several high-ranking officials attached to the government, the Governor of the Central Bank, the Minister of Finance. What were these meetings focused on?
Focused on actually how we can support Sri Lanka do the next step change. Looking at what we can do to support the financial literacy of the country. I think what people tend to forget in this country is that Sri Lanka looks at its own. It's an island, just like the United Kingdom. We have a lot in common, but we also have to fight for our crumbs. It's a competitive world out there, And one of the most important things about that competitive world is we have to be better than the competition.
There is a minority government in Sri Lanka currently. The UNP-led government brought in an interim budget promising economic reform. on the 29th of January this year. However, analysts say that much needs to be done, Lord Mayor. Taking this into account, do you believe the Maithripala Sirisena-led government can bring in economic reform in Sri Lanka?
I've got absolutely no idea the answer to that question. All I can tell you is that, first of all, you diagnose the problem. Once you diagnose the problem, the doctor effectively can work out what the right answer is. I've got no doubt that everyone knows exactly what the problems are at the moment. I think the diagnosis has been done. I'm hoping that with a new president in place, and subject to the next election, which is likely to take place sometime in the next few weeks, hopefully, or the next few months, we'll start to have a government which actually can take these things forward. There is, however, one cautious note, and that is these things are not necessarily that easily delivered. And so expectation has to be at a level which the government of the day can deliver to. Sometimes expectation go ahead of deliverability, and that is a question which the government's going to have to confront.
As you said that you do not have any idea about the financial system here in Sri Lanka, I want to clarify a fact, that is a super gain tax was introduced for large-scale business establishments in Sri Lanka by the November 29th interim budget that was proposed by the present government. What can we learn from a country like London, from the city of London, in terms of bringing in, introducing new tax reforms, keeping in mind the development of the country as well, the forward march of the country?
If you are looking at foreign direct investment, you need to be very careful about any retrospective taxes. Retrospective taxes disturb the valuation and expectations of return of a country. The fact is that you don't want to surprise people with taxes. Taxes should be predictable, and they should be also allowable. In other words, you've got to be able to see them coming. If I'm an overseas business, I have to confront my own shareholders and give them forecasts effectively as to what my profits are going to be. If one of the countries I'm investing in suddenly puts in a retrospective tax, that disturbs my shareholders, makes it more difficult to invest in the country. So retrospective tax treatment is always a very dangerous thing for a country to do, because once it's done once, people might consider it might be done again. So it needs to be a very high statement, high-level statement said, this is a once-off, it will not happen again, and the direction of travel is to one of predictability.
Will foreigners invest in a country when a government does not have control, taking into account the minority government that has been appointed right now, which is taking control?
Well, I think I've seen a number of instances, particularly in Europe, where the technocratic governments have been put in place to actually put right some wrongs that were there before. It depends. Different companies, different people have different levels of risk. There are some people who don't like taking a lot of political risk. Other people will take the political risk. It's all about the direction of travel. It's not about actually where you are at the moment. It's where you are expected to get to, say in about 3 or 4 years' time. That's where the real value add comes in. If people think you can deliver to a much more amenable, much more open economy with a better return, people will begin to take a risk if they think the legal structure is right and the governance is right. So it is about actually leading people effectively along a line of what is predictable, what is effectively good governance.
Prior to your visit to Sri Lanka, Lord Mayor, you said that both Sri Lanka and UK should benefit from increased trade, business partnerships and investment opportunities. During your stay in Sri Lanka, how have you moved forward in this respect?
Well, I think anybody who comes to Sri Lanka now and begins to talk to the people, the fact is you've got a very young but not very mature tourist industry, which actually, with the opening up of government today, I think is going to change quite dramatically. So there needs to be the infrastructure in place. I think my takeaway today is that there are a lot of young, very bright people who have got great aspiration, and this change is going to give them a chance to really show their worth going forward.
Given your distinguished career and your chairmanship of prominent financial organizations, Lord Mayor, including the London Investment Banking Association, what advice do you have to offer a country like Sri Lanka 6 years following an end of a conflict?
I think that you've got to make sure that you are internationally competitive. And to be internationally competitive, you've got to have the right skills involved in the industry, in the people. It's not just skills, it's also creativity, it's also enthusiasm, it's also a desire to compete with the international world. What you can't do is sit at the end of India and say, actually, this is just going to work, Sri Lanka's going to work. You've got to be competitive. And I think Sri Lanka understands that.
Are we on the right track?
I think you're going to be on the right track. There's a bit of way to go yet.
infrastructure development was a key concern of the previous regime. How important is it to a country like Sri Lanka to move forward? Infrastructure facilities, roads, construction of bridges, so on and so forth.
It's critical. I mean, at the end of the day, your ability to get round the countryside quickly and efficiently is critical, as it is to get information to travel. I mean, I understand at the moment it takes quite a long time to go by road to certain parts of the island. Well, either it means there are going to be alternative methods of transport, maybe you fly, but the alternative is actually make sure the roads are actually up to today's standard. So, but it's equally about telecommunications. It's about all sorts of issues. It's about speed. You know, today's world, you need to have a digitally aware economy which actually can deliver product where the global economy needs competition and good pricing. And that means infrastructure has to be good.
What changes do you want to see in a country like Sri Lanka, Lord Mayor? What can we learn from the City of London?
I think I started by saying it's important to have the rule of law. The rule of law has to be there, and has to be seen to be independent and give fair and quick solutions. So dispute resolution is very important. You need to have a good governance system in place, which means you've got to have professionally qualified people, both lawyers and accountants and people who are members of CISI, etc. So that they understand what professionalism means. If you build on those blocks and a highly educated, English-speaking group of people who are energetic and creative, I think you've got a situation where you've got most of the building blocks in place.
This is one final question, Lord Mayor. Let's talk a little bit about the politics in Britain now. How do you view the re-election of David Cameron as British Prime Minister? Do you think the Prime Minister has a vision for Britain in the next few years?
He's just been elected with a majority, and I think he earned it by coming through a very clear vision, actually, that we too, just like Sri Lanka, have to be internationally and globally competitive to succeed. And that means we've got to resolve our own skills gaps and our own infrastructure problems. It's by no means just Sri Lanka that's got these problems. We also share these problems.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for joining us right on this.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, I just want to give you a quick snapshot as to what the Lord Mayor of London is and isn't. The Lord Mayor is a position which is quite rightly introduced. I'm the 687th Lord Mayor. The mayoralty has been around for over 1,000 years. London, as we all used to know it, basically was the City of London. That was London. Westminster effectively is the other city in London, which was formed after the City of London was developed. They copied the governance of the City of London to make sure the House of Commons represented the common people and the House of Lords effectively was the second house. We have a similar structure effectively in the City of London. Now, what do I do? What is my job? I want to tell you a little story. Many years ago I ran a bank called Dresdner Kleinwort effectively, and it was owned Kleinwort Benson Group. I was chairman of Kleinwort Benson Group, which I stepped down to become effectively to become Lord Mayor of London. We were taken over by Dresdner Bank, and I had a business ran around the world. We had about 18 different offices around the world, and they decided it'd be a good idea if I brought in all my reports. So we went on a cultural awareness course. And it was an interesting course because effectively I brought all my reports in from around the world, from Japan, from Singapore, from Boston, New York, etc. Brought into a room in a hotel in London. And the chap stood up and said, right, he said, I want you to put down the left-hand side of a piece of paper all those characteristics of people you admire. You know, modesty, honesty, sense of humour on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, all those things you detest about someone. Pomposity, arrogance, etc. on the right-hand side, and dishonesty. And after I'd done that, I was employing about 60 different nationalities in the bank at the time in my particular division, so cultural awareness was something which I think I was reasonably aware of. But my guy who ran my Paris office came up to me right at the end, and he said, Alan, he said, I know this might be a career-limiting statement, but I'd like to say I think that you are arrogant. And I said, Dimitri, who was Greek, married to a Turk, living in Paris, I said, Dimitri, I said, that's interesting. Because you're right, it might be a career-limiting statement, actually. but should we work out what you mean by arrogance? And he said, yes. He said, say I came up to ask you to play tennis, Alan, and you, having played at Junior Wimbledon, which I didn't, I might point out, but say you had played at Junior Wimbledon, being a Brit, you would simply say, actually, Dimitri, love to old boy, but I'm not very good. He said, that is arrogance. And I said, that's interesting. What do you mean by that's arrogance? I wouldn't have thought that was arrogance at all. He said, well, because it doesn't give me any satisfaction if I beat you, because effectively you said you weren't very good. And what is worse, you're going to beat me, and I thought I was quite good. That's why it's arrogant. And the reason why I say that to you is that one of the British characteristics is we don't like bragging. And consequently, we're frightened of marketing. And it's a big thing about the UK. I don't know what it is about us, but we just do not go out there and we do not pound the pavement. The reason why I tell you that story, because that's my job. I am the salesman. I am here to sell the City of London and the financial services. The UK is the world's leading exporter of financial and professional services, with a trade surplus of 71 billion sterling, which I think, if my maths is right, is about 14.2 trillion rupees. The UK is the largest source of insurance funds and pensions in Europe. Investment in financial technology is growing faster in the UK and Ireland than anywhere else in the world. And the UK accounted for 41% of global foreign exchange trading in up to April 2013, well ahead of the USA, Japan and Singapore. And the UK is the leading Western country for Islamic finance. Basically, we'd handle about US dollars 19 billion of reported assets. Almost two-thirds of all renminbi payments outside China and Hong Kong now take place in London. And 28% of all international renminbi payments are made in the UK, most outside Hong Kong and mainland China. And with the introduction of SIPS coming through in September of this year, we expect that to expand very rapidly. In essence, the City of London has an unrivaled concentration of capital and capabilities, as well as a regulatory system that's effective, fair and principled. And this means that more overseas financial institutions and investors choose to do business in and with the UK than in any other country in the world. The importance of London is it's right at the heart of the UK's international position. But there are cities across the UK which are just as important as financial centres in their own right. And they all feed into and fed by the City of London. For example, in Scotland, Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen. In England, Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester and Norwich. In Wales, Cardiff. In Northern Ireland, Belfast. There are over 2 million people who effectively focus in this particular sector. Only 400,000 of those work in the City of London. The other 1.6 million are around the rest of the country. So it's a very important engine of employment and jobs and growth for the country. And according to independent corporate finance surveyor IMAS, there are just about under 28,000 regulated companies in the UK financial service industry, comprising investment firms, lending businesses, general insurance companies, and associated financial support service providers. There are 976 general insurance companies in the UK, and the industry boasts a number of compelling reasons for overseas firms to invest, including the UK's expertise and skill base. So what have we got? We've got a robust legal and regulatory framework with quick and fair resolution, and the law of contract is critical. We have liquid capital markets, we have transparency in financial reporting and trusted accounting systems. We also have geographic position, i.e. the time clock, and the language, and we also have renewable government. As a result, the UK insurance industry, for example, continues to attract investment from a broad range of overseas investors, as well as from UK-based businesses. And it's the largest Europe and the third largest in the world. The City UK, the independent membership body promoting the UK financial services, reports that London is the only place in the world where all 20 of the world's largest insurers and reinsurers are active. So I think we can all agree the UK is a strong financial service sector and a strong offer to any company thinking of setting up presence there. And here are those vital stats. Financial and related professional services contributed 174 billion to the UK economy. That's sterling. I can't convert it into rupees, I'm afraid. I'm running out of noughts. 174 billion to the UK economy in 2012 represents 12.6% of the UK economic output. It contributed also 65 billion tax receipts in 2012-13, which is 12% of the UK tax receipts. As I said before, we've got 2 million people working in the sector, and almost 320,000 of those 2 million are actually employed in the insurance sector. London vies with New York for the status of the world's leading financial centre, with the Global Financial Centres Index barely able to separate the two cities in their assessment of their competitive strengths. Hong Kong and Singapore are also competing strongly, two examples of financial centres that have based themselves on UK practices and models. Now, working with other financial centres helped develop international networks of UK-based firms, allowing them to expand their international business. In return, the UK has provided access to its markets and expertise from overseas companies and has acted as a template for many developing centres. The City UK reports that financial-related professional services generated a record surplus of 71 billion in 2013, making the UK the world's leading exporter of these services. This 71 billion was more than twice that of the largest trade service recorded by any other country, even the US effectively, and Luxembourg. Financial services also account for around a third of all foreign direct investment into the UK, again more than any other sector. And they also highlight 5 factors that underpin London's status as a premier international financial centre. And that, as I said already, is the geographical centre, the ease of access to markets, the availability of high-quality professional and support services, substantial modern office accommodation, and an efficient communications and infrastructure. Concentration of financial institutions, London now has, as I said already, more foreign banks than any other centre, and it has a resilience as far as its democratic system is concerned. Now, I've certainly hit you with a lot of facts and figures this morning, but underpinning them all are the pillars of a successful financial services sector, and that is professionalism and integrity. As the chairman of the CISI, and a very proud chairman of the CISI, it's leading its way in championing integrity as a key component of professionalism. And these aren't just nice aspirations, we're doing something about it, through an effective combination of knowledge, skills and behaviour. In each of these areas, the CISI has developed products and services that the highest standards of integrity are embedded and regularly tested. The events of the past few years provide a reminder of the importance of firms acting and demonstrating their honesty, openness, transparency and fairness in their business activities. And poor actions by single individuals can result in great cost to firms, both financially through the loss of reputation, and fostering an environment of trust, integrity and professionalism leads to greater confidence and ultimately strengthen the firm's reputation in the market. There is that cliché, and the cliché runs along the lines that it takes a long time to effectively develop the trust of a market, and they say it arrives by foot and leaves in a Ferrari. The CISA is committed to raising standards in global financial services, working with relevant regulator to issue a mandate to the market, a mandate which raises the competency requirements of professionals and introducing international standards, requires individuals to maintain their knowledge, skills and competence, and requires individuals to abide by a code of conduct and provide clarity for all market participants. And in the UK, the FCA, that's our financial regulator for the retail side, the FCA recently raised the minimum level of competency for anyone providing any form of retail advice. And this has resulted in raising standards for professional advisors and providing greater protection for consumers. The result was that the minimum standard was increased by 1 level on the qualification framework, and in addition requiring that individuals demonstrate they've undertaken a minimum of 35 hours of self-development each year. Now, Sri Lankan companies also play a pivotal role, an unseen role, to the development of UK financial services. For example, Millennium IT, which provides the software on which the London Stock Exchange operates on. Software is also used by HSBC in Sri Lanka, processing data for clients in the UK. So we all have a role to play in building the future of our global industry. And we at the CISI and the UK want to support the development of the Sri Lankan financial service industry. Now, one bit of good news, I think it's very exciting news, and that is that we, in the City of London, have developed this scholarship scheme called the Mansion House Scholarship Scheme. And I'm very pleased to say, I'd like to formally announce today that we will be offering a scholarship from the Mansion House to an appropriate person from Sri Lanka. And I'd like you, if anyone's got any particular people they'd like to put forward for a scholarship, to get in touch with the High Commission, and the High Commission will let them know what the criteria are and what the benefits are. It's a very exciting revelation as far as I'm concerned. It's a reward, certainly, for your very kind hospitality to me and my team, but equally, we believe it's also very helpful, I hope, to broaden the interests of the Sri Lankan financial services. Thank you all very much for listening to me today.